Chapter 5 To Speak with a Druid. The following morning was too soon in coming. Sunlight shone on Dower's face through the frosted window, and there was no curtain to shut it out. Waynon was already up and brushing his teeth. He looked over as Dower stirred and buried his face in his pillow.
What's the matter? Aren't you excited for another day of Emogic training? Waynon asked.
Dower grumbled and pulled his blankets over his head. There was nothing to look forward to, not with that girl waiting for him. Granted, yesterday hadn't been that bad, but the thought of having to be around that untrustfully pretty-faced Elpha again sent a chill down his spine. It was also Victor's Day, which meant a lengthy religious class after breakfast. At least there were no classes or trainings on Sundays, so tomorrow would be a welcome break, besides the mandatory church service. Waynon finished his brushing and came to pull the blankets off of Dower and to toss up a change of clothes.
Come on, you don't want to get a late attendance, do you?
Dower sighed and started changing. It wasn't so much that he cared about his attendance, but Waynon would have stayed with him until he came, and then Waynon would have gotten late attendance too.
I wonder why your teacher wanted me to join your class today,
Waynon said as he put his school slippers on. Dower fumbled his head through his shirt and gave Waynon a confused look. Elpha hadn't told him anything about that. He grabbed his journal to ask Waynon for more details.
Dane told me after class yesterday. He didn't say why, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do with boredom.
Dower hummed and finished changing. Perhaps Elpha needed another person to have him use his Emogic on to practice more complicated things. At least it'd be a chance to see if he could channel the knowledge of science directly to Waynon. They left for breakfast, and Dower made sure to stack his plate full. The lunches at the academy went heavy on the meat, so he had gotten into the habit of stuffing himself to last until dinner to avoid going to lunch altogether. Waynon always saved him some extra bread to help get through the day. Then came the dreaded religious class. It was always difficult to decide where to sit, as Dower wanted to be both closest to the door and furthest from the teacher, but he couldn't have both. Today he opted for closest to the door on the corner of the front row, and Waynon sat next to him. The teacher arrived shortly after, a young woman with a demeanor that radiated the message,
"Everything is sunshine and divine,"
which, in Dower's estimation, were always the worst kind of teachers, because they would usually start with questions like,
"What are the main things we must do to maintain our connection to heaven?" the teacher asked.
Dower nearly laughed. Questions exactly like that, which everybody knew the answers to, and yet, somehow, nobody wanted to be the person to blurt out the obvious. So Dower gave Waynon a nudge before the silence got too awkward. Waynon raised his hand and answered,
"Pray, read the 5 sentinels, and follow their instructions." "Good answer, Waynon," the teacher said, as though he had spoken something profound. "But pray to who, exactly?" "All of the sentinels themselves. Heaven, Paradise, Elysium, Valhalla, and Zion."
The teacher took a piece of chalk and began writing the sentinels' names on the blackboard.
"Correct, but we should remember when different prayers should be directed to different sentinels. You wouldn't pray for a bountiful fall harvest from Zion, would you? And you wouldn't pray and ask Valhalla to help you do well in a competition."
Dower rolled his eyes. That showed what she knew. Valhalla might have been primarily associated with knowledge, but he was also a hunter that competed with his brother Zion all the time. The lesson continued with the teacher drawing lines between the sentinels' names and having the class discuss what sort of things one should pray about to which sentinel. Not that the 5 sentinels ever had anything to say about that, but in the minds of the top religious scholars, it followed that because the sentinels were all different from each other, prayers ought to be directed at specific ones for specific things. An hour of torture later, the lesson ended, and the dreaded next form of torture loomed around the corner as Dower and Waynon made it up to the 3rd floor. The classroom was empty when they arrived, however.
"It's typical of her to be a bit late,"
Dower channeled to Waynon, who gave a start at the sound.
"It sounds weird when you talk like that," he said. "It's like I'm hearing you from inside my head." "Sorry, is it better if I make it so it sounds like it's coming from where I'm standing, like this?" Yeah, much better. So, do we sit down? All the desks are put away.
Dower shrugged and opted to just lay down on the floor and stare at the ceiling. Wayne did the same and winced.
This isn't very comfortable. Yeah, I just have a thick skull.
The door opened, and in walked her.
Good morning, my little alien.
Elitha stopped and looked down at them. What are you two doing?
I call it living in the moment, Dower channeled to her and Wayne.
Aha.
Living in the moment looks rather unsanitary.
She came over and lowered a hand towards Wayne to help him stand up. Of course, she didn't lower a hand for Dower.
And you must be Wayne, right?
Wayne gave her a smile.
Yes, nice to meet you, Miss. Sorry, I forgot your name. You can just call me Elitha. Oh, okay. Thanks for inviting me, Elitha. Of course! I appreciate you coming.
Elitha looked down at Dower as if to say,
Look at this wonderful example of a nice boy. Why can't you be more like him?
Wayne turned to Dower and helped him up, and Dower made sure to give Elitha a look that tried to say,
Why can't you be nice like him and help me up too?
though he had never really been successful with facial communication for some reason. He had his guesses.
So why did you want Wayne to join us today? Dower channeled. To try something I thought of last night that wouldn't work with just me, considering what I did yesterday. Anyway, I want to see how well you can use telepathy to channel knowledge directly to someone else. In small portions, to start.
What had she done yesterday that would make her idea not work? There's no way she had copied his entire brain into her own in that one short go yesterday. Was there? She was still tolerating his existence and snakes, even his presence. Sort of. How much did she actually know about him?
I can try channeling to say a sentence with signs, Dower channeled. You can do that? Wayne asked. No idea, but I'll give it a try.
Dower shifted his emogic to telepathy and thought of how to say, My name is Waynen, with signs, sending the knowledge through the telepathy link in such a way that it seemed firmly planted in Waynen's mind, and, well, that was it. Waynen's reaction was immediate. He blinked a few times and looked at his hands, then signed,
My name is Waynen. Whoa. How was it? Elitha asked. Do you feel okay?
Waynen nodded slowly.
Only a tiny bit dizzy. Interesting. Well, that's useful to know. I'm curious, before coming to the academy, did you figure out how to use your emoji to talk to plants or animals at all? Sort of. Why? Well, I read that, or I know that it's sort of like telepathy, and I thought humans are animals too, so shouldn't you be able to communicate with them in a telepathic way like Dower can?
Waynen shook his head.
No, I've tried, and it's like talking to a wall. I think it's because what I do isn't actually telepathy. I don't really get into the mind of whatever I'm channeling to. It just lets us talk. Since I can already do that with humans, it has no effect.
Dower hummed.
I can't talk. What happens if you try it on me?
Waynen made a thoughtful look.
Good question.
He turned and focused on Dower. Nothing changed about how Dower felt, but then maybe Waynen was only trying to listen.
I am thinking about birds, Dower thought, then channeled. Hear anything?
Waynen shook his head.
I don't think it's working.
As he spoke, the images of a few hand signs flashed through Dower's mind, making him blink. They meant, more or less, exactly what Waynen had spoken.
I think it is, Dower channeled, then signed, but differently than expected.
Waynen gaped.
I just heard, do that again.
Once more, images of signs flashed through Dower's mind. It struck him as odd, especially since he could hear and understand normal language just fine. He signed some more.
Talking with my hands, and you can hear my hands in your head, can't you?
Waynen nodded.
Yeah, that's so weird. I wonder if it won't work when you teach me more signs.
Dower winced at the barrage of signs flashing through his mind.
Okay, stop talking. It's making me see hands in my head and I don't like it. Oh, sorry, I stopped channeling.
Elitha looked between the two of them with an odd smirk.
That's a rather interesting discovery. I'll have to let the headmaster know what we figured out. Does this mean my name will go down in history for helping discover that druids can talk to mutes? Dower asked. Do you think they'd let a kid with a name like Dower Mockin go down in history?
Dower shrugged.
No, but one can hope. I think you should, Wayne said. We wouldn't have figured it out without him. But I'd like to learn more science so we don't have to use our emojic or paper to communicate. You two can stick around and work on that then, Elitha said, walking to the door. I'm gonna go nap until lunch. Wayne had stared after her. Aren't you supposed to stay and teach? Nah, you guys can have fun messing around for a bit. Just don't break anything. She left the room, then her head popped in through the doorway. Seriously, don't. Then she was gone. What an odd creature. Dower made his way over to the teacher's desk and climbed on top to lay down and hang his head over the side. I guess we can see how much I can teach you by lunch, he channeled. Wayne had nodded, still staring at the door. I wonder how other animals communicate when I use peace. It felt different channeling at you compared to birds. That's not surprising. Most birds are pretty stupid, and plants don't even have brains, but you can still talk to them. What's that like? The books Dower had read about druids were plentifully detailed of the sort of things plants and animals would communicate, but there was nothing about what communicating with them actually felt like. It's hard to explain. I haven't channeled to that many plants, so maybe it's different depending on what I channel to. But it was a bit like music. Like a million voices singing the same thing. Except for potted plants. Those were just single voices, and sounded more like untuned instruments. Confused about themselves, I think. There's not much they say that I know words for.
Dower supposed that made sense. Most druids became involved with farming or livestock in some way, as they were able to understand problems the food or animals were having, and what needed to be done to solve them. And with the help of immortals, love Emogicians, who were able to make plants grow like it was nothing, among other things, there had almost been never a bad harvest season in the history of Elisinar.
Well, that's all fascinating, but let's get you talking using your hands. What do you want to learn first?